Hey guys, welcome back to Sunday Sermon with Ola. Woo! Um, thank you guys very much, man. I have to say a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. You guys are still going strong, and we just hit 20 patrons, so I'm very appreciative. Thank you for supporting the podcast, the sketches, the work that I'm doing online on social media, and all the other projects that are in store. I'm constantly thinking about Sunday service and how to bring Sunday service back. I haven't figured it out yet, but it's still in my mind. So I want you to know that I really appreciate the support, and also I want to give you more of that work that you love. And you're paying for something that's quite, unique and I guess premium in some sense of the word. So it takes a bit more effort, it takes a bit more work. It's not as simple, but it's worth doing as long as you guys see value in it. So thank you guys. Thank you also again to everybody who got involved in last week's discussion. Again, another topic that really hit hard with people, and the live just went off. And yeah, I think we ended up doing a good 3 hours again. It was solid. It was intense. Shout out to Godfrey. I am Goddess. Rav, you shook it up. Thank you to Tina. Thank you to Ellis. Thank you to everybody that jumped on. Herschel, Danny, everybody that got involved. It was such a good discussion, and I think it's probably one of the conversations I've learned the most from. So that was fantastic. And if you're missing out on these shenanigans, get involved in the ecosystem. Listen to the pod first thing on a Sunday, and then join in the conversation on the Sunday evening. And even if you haven't heard the pod, you can still join in the conversation, but it helps if you have heard the pod. And invite people, get people involved. Okay, enough promotion and plug-in and so on. Just keep an eye on my social media stuff, especially Instagram. And yeah, man, I'm going to keep putting out that work. Okay, let's get into today's topic. So, today's topic is, it's about cultural appropriation, but I want to come at it from the angle of intrinsic value. Okay, so, what actually sparked the conversation was one that I had with my wife. And we don't always have that many sort of like society issue conversations together. I think sometimes I'm a bit too intense for her, and she's just like, I don't care that much to really go back and forth on this issue with you. But also, I think, these kind of issues, they somehow find their way deep into our thoughts and emotions, and so sometimes, you can discuss it from a place of some kind of believing it's subjective, but it's highly subjective. A lot of these things are highly subjective, and that's no better illustrated than in this story this week. Now, you would have seen it. A lot of people spoke about it. A lot of people did videos on it. Again, this is one of the ones that I wrote on Jason Lewis's show about Safe Space for the Culture. So it was about Adele. Adele posted a picture on what would have been Carnival's Bank Holiday Monday. It's her in a bikini with the Jamaican flag on it. She's got her hair in Bantu knots. She's got the carnival outfit. And she's basically saying, shout out to my city, London. It would have been Notting Hill Carnival. Now, people obviously, it ignites same old debates. Twitter does its thing. Lots of back and forths and so on. She did troll a little bit more as well on the Brandy versus Monica versus battle. She was in the comments typing in patois, and I think that's kind of funny, but it's just continuing that sort of dialogue about cultures. So we have to have a discussion about cultural appropriation. This is a conversation I'm having with my wife, and she just basically asked me what my thoughts were on it. And the thing about cultural appropriation arguments, the reason why I'm going to say what I'm going to say is because I've had so many of the initial discussion. I think a lot of people, I want to have like the initial discussion once and for all, but I want to spend more time on the secondary discussion. So the initial discussion is, Is this cultural appropriation? Why is cultural appropriation a bad thing? All of those kind of things. I'm not so interested in those because they kind of come from the sort of social justice warrior approach, and I'm not that person specifically. I don't think they're always bad people or that what they're doing is wrong, but it's just not my approach. So, in this situation, I said, I don't think this is cultural appropriation. I think it's appreciation of the culture, or participation in the culture, but not necessarily appropriating. Why? There were some key fundamentals that were missing from it. One, she wasn't profiting from this. She wasn't profiting from the fact that she posted this picture. She just simply posted the picture. Number two, she wasn't being given undue props for it. It wasn't like she was now being labeled the originator of Bantu knots or the one who made carnival attire look chic. It was just her wearing the stuff. And thirdly, she was giving the appropriate props. She was clearly saying that this is a carnival outfit and she's giving props to London as the host of Notting Hill Carnival. Maybe there could have been more to say, oh, give it up for Jamaica and all the... It sounds really bad to say it that way around. Let's just say, give it up for all the Caribbean islands. I was about to say Jamaica and all the other islands, and I know that's how beef starts. Give it up for all the Caribbean islands for their huge impact around the world, blah, 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 blah. But to be honest, yeah, this is Instagram, right? So, chill. So essentially, she's not really appropriated the culture in that sense of the word for me. And so that leaves us in a tricky position about when one can, participate in cultures and so on. I think, the fundamental of it is that you have to remember cultural appropriation, all of these discussions, they are about power structures. They're not really about, jerk rice or whatever it is. It's about who exerts their power in society to, get wealth, to attain status, and who is excluded and marginalized from that. That's what the discussion's about. If you remember that, you're more likely to have a fruitful discussion on the issue. That's my take on it. So it's not just about like, I don't like white people, I don't want them wearing my clothes. It's more about, I don't like when white people are able to wear my clothes and then be given opportunities that would otherwise be withheld from me for wearing those exact same clothes. That's the problem. So, I think most of that first discussion is dealt with, right? We've kind of addressed it. Oh, there's one thing I also have to say is that whilst I do have all of these very clear-cut beliefs about, this is what I think cultural appropriation is, I also wholeheartedly understand why some people are wary and suspicious. I completely understand it. What I've said is very level-headed and it's a true assessment. But sometimes, like I said before, these issues are tied in and they're sometimes highly emotional. So sometimes it just doesn't feel right. Sometimes you just don't like it. And that's fine. I'm not sure it's cultural appropriation. Sometimes you just don't like it. And sometimes you're quick to call cultural appropriation because you don't want to let it get that far first. Right? So if the problem tends to be that a white person does something from the black culture, then eventually they profit from it and they're seen as the originators of it and then they get opportunities because of it. Sometimes you don't want to wait for all of that to unfold. You just want to cut them off at the moment where they're doing something from the black culture. And I think in some ways it's fair, in some ways it's unfair. I think if we could hold white people as one community and make them all responsible for each other's behavior, like sometimes is done to the black community, then yeah, it would be fair. You'd be like, no, you guys are on timeout from our culture. We can't let any single one of you touch it because one of you messed it up. But be honest, in real life, it doesn't work like that. And a big part of what we're talking about is based on relationship. It's based on relationship. There are times in which, if you have a white friend and you know their heart and their intention, they can say some things and do some things that are not overtly offensive, but could offend other people. But to you, because you know their heart, you know where they're coming from, you don't necessarily take it that same way. I'll give you a good example of this. When I was coming up, doing stand-up, my first DVD actually is hosted by a guy named Jamie Howard. Now, Jamie Howard is a white guy, and he was performing mainly on the black circuit, or doing black comedy shows when I came up. And he used to say stuff that was clearly offensive. You know, the obvious one that I remember was like, "Oh, did you guys watch the African Cup of Nations? Do you see the match between Egypt and Ethiopia?" If I remember correctly, I think it was like Egypt ate and Ethiopia didn't. Like, it was funny to me. I mean, it's very rude, very tongue in cheek, but it was funny. Now, a bunch of us black comedians are all friends with Jamie. And I think one of the reasons why he got a blight is because we knew that his whole posture on stage was that he is the douchebag. What he's saying is wrong. I think that's very different. Now, there are other situations, and this is something I'd like to get into further, because I think a lot of them have been resolved now, and we've actually got to a good place. But there's other situations where I felt the need to speak up or to say something and call out a white comedian because of what they were saying to black audiences, and they weren't necessarily on the surface. It wasn't necessarily on the surface obviously as rude, but I felt it to be quite insidious. Right? I felt it to be like the nature of this relationship isn't right. The power dynamic is too much at play. Jamie's power dynamic was like your cheeky little brother, and it's very clear at some point that this boy could get beaten up for what he's saying. And so he does it knowing that he might get punched in the face. But there's a different dynamic where you kind of say it with an air of maybe superiority, of knowing that you have privilege over the people you're talking to. Or you have a need to which, or you have a sense to which you know that you can feed their need for attention. So you can say whatever you like and they'll lap it up. That was what I had a problem with at the time. And again, like I said, it's something I may speak on more extensively in another time. But I just want to highlight how much your relationship with the people you're speaking to has a lot to do with it, right? There's always banter you can make with your friends that you can't make with a stranger. That's the nature of it. And that also explains the reason why a lot of black British people, when it came to Adele, didn't have that much of an issue with it, but Americans did. They didn't have the same relationship with Adele. Adele came to them as a star that's being imported to the US. Whereas for us, it was more homegrown. It was like, for the people who love Adele, they've been listening to Adele for the longest. They see her as one of them in terms of like, she came up here in London. So the way in which you frame her is always going to be different. Okay, that's the first discussion. That's all the usual cultural appropriation discussions. The second part of the discussion, and that's the main part for me, and it's mostly what I end up discussing with my wife, is the part that I'm most passionate about. And is what I call intrinsic value. I saw it recently put, that if there's like two products on the shelf, they're both $5, and someone comes into the shop and only buys one of them, that one is validated at its price, $5. But the one that didn't get bought, is it still worth $5? It's a good question to ask yourself. Because then it makes you ask yourself, like, what gives it that $5 value? The person selling it has put the price tag on it, but if no one's willing to buy it, does that person still believe it's worth $5? That's the question I want us to ask about ourselves, our creations, our culture. Do we have any intrinsic value? Or is the entirety of our value based on where white people value us, where rich people value us, where the masses value us, where the youth value us, where the Western world values you, where the financial market values you? Do you have any intrinsic value other than what someone else has put on you? I've done work for £6.50 an hour, and I've done work at a pro rata rate of maybe, let's say, £6,000 an hour. I've done both of them. If I went back to do the £6.50 one, does that mean the value of my time has somewhat changed? That's what I want us to ask ourselves about our creations and our culture. I don't think we fully understand, and the reason why I'm so passionate about this side is because it's more inward speaking. I know a lot of us just like to say, oh, we can't, they don't let us. I'm not of that frame of mind. I want to ask us, black people of any ethnicity that has felt like their culture has been taken advantage of, do you have any intrinsic value of your own culture? Because what I see the problem to be sometimes is that if you are waiting for someone else to validate your culture, they will, but they will always do it in a way that suits them. So you have to ask yourself, what were you doing with it before they came and took it? Why do things always happen to you? Why are you not making things happen? I know the things they've done. I know I don't need to be like schooled in like the tricks and the undermining and the literal violence that white supremacy has propagated over other cultures. But I've seen some cultures fight back. Fight back physically, fight back economically, fight back socially. So I have to ask, like, what did you do about it? You know, every time, like, if let's say the conversation that I was having with my wife, like the way it took was like we brought up the issue of the Ghana must go bags, which we really need to get a new name for, by the way. It's hella disrespectful, and I don't know if Ghanaians still take it as banter, but like if you don't, I'm sorry, but that's the name that we know it by. All right, so this bag is popularized. It's that checkered plastic. I don't know what to call that material. A bag that you usually get the bric-a-brac shop, and anything from £1.99 to like £5 sometimes if they're particularly big. And they're known as Ghana must go bags. They're popularized because there was a time in which Ghanaians were scapegoated in Nigeria as the reason for economic problems. And so the regime at the time gave every Ghanaian like 24 hours to get out of the country. So all of them bought these bags to quickly pack their belongings and make their way to Ghana. So it's really a story of oppression behind those bags anyway. But forget that. All right, so we use these bags, a lot. I guess our parents have a cultural or somewhat nostalgic attachment to these bags, and they just come in handy sometimes when you need something cheap to put a lot of stuff in. And funny enough, IKEA even have their own version of it. It's clear, it's see-through, but it's the same kind of fabric, same kind of, I don't know fabric, but material. Now, there was a time when I think like Gucci came out with their version. It was pretty much the same pattern, but they stamped Gucci on it. And it was, as you can imagine, a Gucci price tag. Now, the way my wife was describing it was like, we don't get a chance to just charge that amount. And I'm like, who told you can't? Who told you can't charge that price? Nobody said you can't, charge this price and blah, blah, blah. What you don't have is a brand that people believe in as much as Gucci. So then you have to ask yourself, why do Gucci have that much of a brand? I think we have to ask ourselves why so many of us help build other people's brands and then complain when those brands don't give us props. Like, we're doing this the wrong way round. That's one question. Second of all, every time I see something like a product like that come out, rather than complain, like, how can you take something from our culture, blah, 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 we've been using these bags. I want to know, show me a black-owned business that provides that product, and I'll simply vote with my wallet. I'd rather purchase it there. If I was going to buy it, I'll buy it there. But there was no black-owned business that was prevalent that was doing this kind of business, selling these kind of bags. Why? Because we didn't see any value in it. This was something we didn't even sell it to ourselves. I'm sure they're like made in China, first of all. But second of all, there's a lot of Asian-owned bric-a-brac stores that were selling it anyway. We happily go and give them £6 for the bag. Not realizing this issue you have with Gucci, you've been having it all the way before. You just didn't understand that the economics of it was that because it was £6, you thought, it's okay. But the problem is, like, these things that we claim so dear to our culture, a lot of the times, we don't even produce it. We don't even distribute it. Okay, so the next question is, well, how come when they do it, it's chic, and when we do it, it's ghetto? That's only because you keep believing it. White people have told us time and time again not to wash our chicken. We still wash our chicken. We don't have to believe everything that, the general white consensus says. We know this. We rebel on many an occasion. I've seen on the Twitter timeline, a lot of white English people saying they don't wash their legs in the shower, and black people going, "This is crazy. I can't stand it." It's not only hygiene we're allowed to like break away. We're allowed to say, do you know what? I don't think Gucci is chic. I don't think this is ghetto. We're allowed to say it. Or we're allowed to say, I don't care for what you think is chic. I actually prefer what is ghetto. You can say that as well. Literally, we keep buying into it and complaining about it. I don't understand that mentality. I don't believe whenever we have problems just about railing against black people. I'm not, but I want us to wake up from some of the patterns and habits we've been. Do you know what? Yeah, we're just so settled in this pattern of like something happens, it comes up, we all get offended, we shout about it. We say we're gonna do a boycott, whatever it is, and then what? On the other hand, if I want to have Chinese food, yes, there are white-owned companies selling, sort of Eurocentrized versions of Chinese food. But if I want Chinese food, there are more than enough Chinese-owned restaurants and takeaways around for me to go and enjoy their food from them and keep the money circulating in their economy. They took a whole section of London and said, this is our town, this is Chinatown. So are you, even if they watch somebody else make like terrible versions of their food, it doesn't matter so much. Because we all know deep down, if we want decent Chinese food, we're going to go to a Chinese restaurant where Chinese people are eating, Chinese people are serving, Chinese people own it, and so on and so forth. Why is it us consistently asking other people to show? I had the same conversation about the content I'm making. That's the reason I moved to the whole Patreon model. I was like, why? Look, my audience is out there. I don't know where all of you guys are. I don't know you guys in terms of all the marketing demographics. But what I do know is you're out there because I see you. I perform in front of you. You come to Sunday service. You like the show. You like Sunday sermon. You come on the lives, whatever it is. You're scattered, but you're out there, right? Now, I want to reach you. So I try and go to the TV station, I go to the production company to try and explain to the production company why I think the content I want to make for you is going to bang. They go, I don't know, maybe you should tweak it, this is blah, 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 blah. Most of the time, they are not my audience. They are not me. They are just simply a third party. After all of that, they then go and pitch it to the broadcaster. The broadcaster has to decide, do we want this on our channel, blah, 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 before it finally gets to you and you finally decide if you like it or not. I say, hold on a second. Why am I consistently going back to someone who doesn't understand my narrative to explain my narrative so that I can tell it to somebody who understands my narrative? It's only because of money, really. So how about we just cut out the middleman and I just give you the content, you give me the money? Surely that makes sense, right? It's a very simple business model. But it took me breaking out of that mentality of consistently trying to explain my ideas and contextualize them. Because when they're giving me feedback, they're not giving me feedback based on how best to reach you. They're giving me feedback on how best to reach as many people that they want to sell products to, right? They need it to do certain demographics for the channel so they can sell ad revenue. That's what makes sense. I understand the business model. I understand the hustle. By all means, God bless them. But it does mean that if you don't belong to a desirable or a large enough demographic, you're never going to get the content you want on TV. Especially in a highly specialized world like this. They will make 16 shows about antiques and wine tasting and, traveling to the Amalfi Coast. And because that's what the demographic they care about watches. Do you understand that? They're doing it because that's what makes sense for them. So in the same way, for me as somebody who wants to sell to you, I can't spend my whole time complaining, oh, they don't want to put us on, they don't want to put us on. I'm like, why don't I just come to you? I know I'm a lot of the time I might be dealing with somebody who is not in a big demographic, but I actually believe that demographics aren't as tight as people think they are. Because I'm able to watch Blackadder and absolutely love it. I can watch Only Fools and Horses and laugh. So some of these demographics that people think, are, excluded, might actually end up enjoying what you do. So in the same way, if you had that balls and you looked at Ghana Must Go Back and said, nah, this is actually high fashion. I believe in this. There is a way to which you might not be able to charge the same as Gucci, but there is a way you could have marketed those bags. And yes, your initial customer base might be other Africans and Caribbeans. It's a small customer base and blah, blah, blah. But we tend to be tastemakers. You never know. It could have been the next big trend. It could have been something that every white kid in school wants to wear to school. They want to carry their Ghana Must Go bag for sports or whatever it is. I highly doubt it, by the way. But this is something that could have happened. If you believed in your stuff. And I don't know if the Gucci thing was particularly successful, but what I do know is the situations in which we complain and we've actually got our own alternative don't hit as hard. We can talk about, Jamie Oliver doing jerk rice because we know what good rice is. We know so many Caribbean takeaways. That's a perfect example of how you don't fight it by complaining. You fight it by doing the right way. So just think about that. That's all I'm asking. I'm charging you. I didn't think it was going to take this long, to be fair. It's ended up being longer than I expected. But all I'm charging you to do is to say, do you know what? Next time, before I'm about to complain about cultural appropriation, let me ask myself, what did I do about it? Before I say, oh, the Chinese are using all the African resources, what have I done to make sure these African resources are used well? These people do not have two heads. They know how to manipulate the system. They do know how to work with African leaders. They know how to get it done. Ordinary Chinese people, I'm not just talking about like higher level Chinese executives. I'm talking about Chinese people are coming and buying up farms and growing food and selling it to Africans. There's literally nothing stopping you from doing that. Even if you don't have petroleum expertise, you can go and figure out agriculture. You can go and figure out like water salination. You can do something. I know it's more comfortable to say, oh, they're mean, blah, 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 whilst you ask for more jobs. But I'm saying at some point, we're going to have to take control of this narrative. That's all I have to say. If you agree with me, you don't agree with me, I'd love to hear your thoughts tonight on the live discussion, 8 p.m. Please do jump on. Please come and tell me what you think. If you feel like I'm wrong or if you feel like you got a different way. But either way, I appreciate you. God bless you. Stay blessed.